what's up guys? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Michelle Senour, if you guys don't know me, and I'm excited that you guys are here today. I am a salon owner and I'm a stylist, an educator, and the host of the Limitless podcast, which is why you guys are watching this right now. So we're so excited to be taking you on a video of one of my episodes for the Limitless podcast. The Limitless podcast link will be in the description below, but we are out here live in nature. That's why you hear the cars just blaring, and so you're gonna hear birds chirping, babies crying. It's about to be super good, and my girl Katie is here to interview me today. We're talking about salon ownership, salon commission versus rental, hot topic, how I transitioned my salon, and then also getting into some really good Q&A questions from our listeners. So let's get to it. Okay, beautiful, you guys. If you're hearing a little bit of noise in the background, we're doing something a little bit different today. We're going out and about and just at a coffee shop, hanging out right now. I've got my girl Katie back on the podcast, the best interviewer I have ever met, and we have our coffee orders. Let's start with that. Mine is a honey lavender latte iced with half sweet and light ice. Katie, welcome to the show. Tell us your fall order.
Thank you. I'm all about this pumpkin spice latte these days, so I had to do it. You know, it's already fall. We got to get this little fall vibe going. Almond milk base. That's what I like.
Yes. That. Yep. Dairy baby. Let's go. Shout out to all the people with the gut problems. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so today's episode, limited edition episode, is about rental versus commission salons, and we get so many questions about this, you guys, and we wanted to dedicate a whole episode to this because it is hot topics. So let's start by this. Let's do a little recap for our audience. Maybe if you're joining us new to the podcast, a little bit about where you started, kind of how you went to owning a salon and where you're transitioned to now, and just kind of recap for the listeners.
Yeah, so if you guys don't know me, I am Michelle Senour. I do a lot of different things. I own a salon now. I'm also a stylist. I'm an educator and obviously the host of the Limitless podcast. I also have an education program for hairstylists, so major passion for teaching. But what got me to this point, okay, we didn't start here, so if you guys are listening to this, I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of my history. So I went to cosmetology school right out of high school, kind of as a secondary option maybe, but I fell in love with it. So initially I thought, I'll go here and then I'll pay my way through college while I have a job. But I absolutely fell in love with the beauty industry. I love the creativity, love the passion. So here we are now 12 years later, still thriving. So with that being said, I went to cosmetology school and I started at a commission salon right after that. Think more corporate vibes, so larger salon, really systematic. And I learned a lot from that experience, especially being an assistant as well. I assisted for 6 months and then transitioned to being a stylist there. Actually, prior at that salon, I worked the front desk. So I've got a lot of history. I really just wanted to learn the ins and outs, which all of these experiences have led me to where I am today. And then when I was at that commission salon, I just kind of got to the point where I outgrew it. And that's okay. Sometimes we outgrow certain models at certain salons, and I really wanted to expand and be a little bit more creative. And I just on a whim was like, okay, the decision is made. I'm going to go open my own suite. So I started as an independent stylist then after that. It was a very quick transition for me and terrifying, absolutely terrifying. I remember how scary it was just to make sure my music was turned on and the coffee was ready. Like, there's so many things when you go from just being a stylist to then having your own little business behind the chair. And so I transitioned then to being an independent renter inside of a tiny, tiny little suite. And
I was going to ask too, was it popular to do that at the time? Like, I feel like there's so many suites and rentals situations now, but like, was that an option back then?
It was, but it wasn't as heavy as it is now. Like, it was definitely an option, but there wasn't as much education around transitioning to that. Whereas like now there's so many educators that are educating on just how to become an independent renter. I mean, even within my salon space now, that's something that I educate them on how to do. So I was doing that. I was, lost and confused, had no idea what I was doing, but I figured it out. And then that's how you learn, right? So then from there, that was about let's see, that was March. And then in December of that year, I hired my first team member who's behind the camera right now.
Oh, shout out.
Shout out to Britt. And so I hired her super part-time. I want to say it was maybe like 10 hours or 12 hours a week. She was like cleaning my salon space. She had came back from college, was taking some time off to figure out what she was doing. And then she allowed me to figure out how to have a team member. So thank you for that. It was, I think on both ends, we learned so much. And then from there, I really got the idea, wow, I grew so quickly in here. I was definitely hustling. I wouldn't recommend what I was doing, but I was definitely hustling, but it led me into wanting to become a salon owner. And so it was in, I would say, January of the following year that I started thinking of names and kind of coming up with the idea. So just under a year in, and then from there in June I started to really dive deep into it and signed actually on July 4th I signed for the space for L&Co.
Independence, baby.
Independence Day, independent baby. So I did that, and then I started the build-out process, and we opened then the following January. So I started in March of 2018, and then I opened my salon in January 9th of 2020.
Yay. And this, when you set out to do this, we've kind of talked about this a little bit before on the podcast, but you wanted to do commission, but in a different way. Can you kind of talk about the things that you wanted to switch up in that process?
Yeah, so I started the salon as a commission salon, and at that point I really had to sit down with myself, see where I was at as a leader, where I wanted to commit my time, and how I wanted to build my space. And so I came up with the conclusion at that time to be a commission salon, which for those of you who know a little bit about me, I've recently transitioned to rental, which we'll dive into a lot of that later. But I really wanted to do commission salon a little differently than what I had done. I wanted them to still have the freedom and flexibility. I wanted it to feel really collaborative. I wanted them to feel like they could reach for the stars. They weren't held back by certain level systems or the ability to have a weekend off. I wanted them to be able to kind of have their cake and eat it too a little bit, and I think they did. And it was really successful. And the transition wasn't for the reason of it wasn't working. It was the reason for the industry had changed. I had changed where I was at in my business, and so that's what led me into that. But at the time, I mean, I love commission models. I think commission models are fantastic, and yeah, we'll dive into how to kind of find out maybe what's right for you.
Yeah, I was going to ask too, maybe a little bit more nitty gritty of the details, like what was the split for the stylist? How many stylists did you have? Like, you know, if somebody is trying to open up their own commission salon, you know, kind of what were some of those ideas that you put into place?
Yes, so commission scale is definitely really important. When I was a commission stylist, I was on what's called a sliding scale. So that meant the more you make, the more percentage you could make. Obviously, the larger salon you're in, the more expenses you have, the little bit tighter you probably have to be with your commission split. But I also wanted it to be fair to them. But I also needed to make sure I made some money as a business owner. Like, why take on all that responsibility and not make any money? That would kind of be a pointless business. So I decided to just do a straight commission, not like a sliding scale. So I started with 42% commission when we first started, and then I bumped it up to 45 when they, you know, would build and gain more clientele and become more successful. And now I do a 45% commission, and they also make retail as well. So at that point, it was when I was commission salon, it was a sliding scale. It was between 10 to 12%, because I feel like that's pretty easy. Like, okay, you hit $500 between 0 and 500, cool. You hit 500 plus, I don't know, whatever it was at the time, right. Then you make your 12%. So that was my commission split. And as far as like their schedules and how they did have specific salon hours, but I would really work with the stylist on, okay, are you a new stylist? You probably want to work a little bit of nights and a little bit of weekends. We want to build you up quick, but I'm totally open and flexible to what works with your lifestyle. As long as you're getting booked, I'm cool with it. So schedule wise was really a collaborative thing, but we all kind of enjoyed working similar hours because we really loved working together. And I think one of the things that people think is the more stylists you have, the better your salon is, but that's 1000% not true. It's really about having those right people. And the interviewing and the hiring process can be really intimidating when starting a new business because you're just trying things out. You don't know how they are going to go. And so throughout my experience, I really refined that to then be able to find the right stylist. And I was never pushing for a fast building salon by any means. But it's more important to have those really valuable stylists that understand your salon's mission and really live it, breathe it, and then slowly build from there to get your space. So
that's so helpful, because I was going to speak about the culture as well. And I know some salons, they get really strict about selling retail and all that stuff. And there was a way in which you did it that I thought was very natural. It's like, I'm doing it this way and you can be successful at this way too. I don't know if you want to speak a little to that.
Absolutely. I mean, the end goal at the end of the day is I wanted them to be extremely successful, right? And I think they always knew that. So when it came to me suggesting, okay, here's what we're going to do to hit our numbers for our services, it's not always based off of what my goal was, but also bringing in their goals. So if your income goal is to make $85,000 this year, what does that mean in numbers we have to do? So it wasn't just based off of what made Michelle and the business thrive, it's also what's making that stylist thrive. And so I really think that was the key to making it not feel like you were necessarily maybe trapped or, stuck in this commission model like some of the old school traditional ones are.
Mm-hmm. And one other thing too, I know when you first got your space, it was a big space, and that was also a little bit intimidating. And like you said, you weren't looking to grow into this massive thing per se. But now, like when we're looking for your space, was there any tips you had for like what you wanted? And now that you have it, can you see it any other way? I mean,
Yes. So I was definitely looking at way smaller spaces than I ended up getting, but I am very happy that I got the size that I got, because knowing myself, this is all about knowing you. You really got to dive deep into yourself before you make these decisions. Yeah. I love change. I love growing. I love expanding. I don't love feeling like I can't do something I want to do because of my space. So at the time, I was looking for smaller ones out of fear of finances. I really had to make sure I could afford a larger space. So I totally understand. There's some barriers there sometimes. But I'm glad I went with that larger space, because it's allowed me to change the space within the last few years to whatever I really wanted it to be. And so I think one of my pieces of advice for someone looking for a space is to know yourself, think about what's important to you. You might really only want a 3-chair salon, and that's beautiful and that's amazing. But having the ability to have extra space that you can change to be more functional for your space or change to grow your business, I think is a really special thing to have, because you spend a ton of money building out your salon. And if I had gone with the smaller space I was originally looking at, I would have spent probably 3 times as much having to switch the space. My renovations would have basically been worthless at that point. So I think thinking about the future and where you could possibly go is a really cool thing to think about. And for me, I really needed tall ceilings, natural light. I wanted to feel, I know how important it is for me and my environment to feel a certain way. And so I know that I need it to feel clean and open and spacious and airy, because I had been in situations where they were not that way. And I literally get anxiety, like just being in that. So I know for me, is it the best use of my space to have as many stations as I have? I could have 30. No. But is it for my sanity and how I want my space to feel and my culture? Yes. So that's how I kind of decided, and my tips for my top tips and lessons that I think I learned from my build out.
Okay, just kind of wrapping up on the commission, what were some of the biggest pros you saw having this model as a salon owner, and what were some of the challenges you saw with it?
All right, so the pros that I feel like I saw were, I felt like it was very easy and clear to define my culture, because I was the owner and they were employees. So that was really nice. I really loved growing and building stylists. So that was also a pro for me. I was in this opportunity of leadership where they looked to me like Mama Bear, like help me, lead me, teach me, grow me. And so they really gave me the opportunity to do that. You can make more money if you work really hard and you know your numbers and your stylists are very successful. You have the opportunity to grow. Whereas if obviously you're a rental salon, yes, you can still grow in areas, but you've got your rent that they're paying. There's not that additional income coming in. So if that's where you want to pull your money from, that's super important. But then to the downside of that as well is you're providing all of the products, so there's a lot of product waste that sometimes happens. So if they're wasting product or I'm wasting product, then you're losing money. You do have to spend more time leading, managing, organizing. All of the duties kind of fall on you. And so that can sometimes be a downside as well. And I think the other downside is that it's a hard model for really successful stylists to grow in. And I was hiring very successful people that wanted to do a lot. And so once you get to a point within being a commissioned stylist, they want something else. They want to, not that that's the right way to go. Not everybody should do that. Not everybody's meant to be a rental stylist. There's a lot of things you have to do. But at the same time, I found the people that I was attracting, that was something that they wanted. So pros and cons, I mean, there's a lot of them.
Yeah. And yeah, you did create this stylist commission base of just independence, and the girls kind of grew into their own, and then we were kind of asking like, okay, what are the next steps? And it does seem industry-wise that a lot of people are going to this rental model. So can you talk a little bit about how you transitioned into that too?
Yes. I think the first thing I had to do was sit down with myself again, just like what I did when I was creating my commission salon. I had to sit down with my pen and paper. I had to weigh the pros and cons. I had to think about where I was at in life, what I wanted my roles to be like, what I wanted the salon culture to be like. I had to go back to all of that first, and I first had to sit with myself. It took me a long time to transition because this isn't a small decision. Not only does it impact me, but it impacts my team, and that was super important to me. So once I sat down and I really thought about what I wanted the next couple years to look like for me as a salon owner and what I wanted it to look like for my team, it just became more apparent that this switch was right for me. So when I decided to do that, the next thing I had to do was I had to communicate this option to my team. I didn't make a decision without talking to them. I wasn't like, I think that's what happens sometimes is these salon owners, you can't give your team all of the option, but you do need to gauge and make them feel supported throughout the journey. So
you're not just throwing them off a cliff.
Right. No, I mean, no way. That doesn't feel good to anybody. It feels heartless. It feels selfish. And I think that's where a lot of business owners really fall is they get into this ego, they get into this selfishness. And yes, you do got to do what's right for your business. Bottom line, 1,000%. Not every question is going to get a yes. But at the same time, these are their lives too. This is their income too. So then from there, I had a meeting with them, and I just brought up it as an idea. Like, what would you guys think about if this was a possibility here? And I got mixed feedback at the time. I had some people that were a little bit more scared. I had some people that were like, oh, that sounds amazing. We have a baby crying in the background, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Somebody get her a sucker. I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding. So I feel like at that point, I did get mixed reviews, and it wasn't that I was making that decision right away. So then I really sat down, and then I was like, okay, let me dive back into this after conversating with them. Let me run the numbers, because it was going to be taking an income step back for me, which can be kind of scary, right? But that income step back was allowing me to progress farther in my other businesses. So it was kind of like where the salon was my income generator and my education was almost like a side gig. It was like, it's time to flip that. Let's see what can happen. So we ended up, it was probably what you think, like a year and a half?
Yeah, at least.
We actually did that. So I started changing the space. I needed to add more stations. I needed to add storage. So I started that process because we all know how long it can take just to get a piece of wood these days. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to change the space around. We didn't utilize our rental space for a little bit. And I allowed any commission stylists that were on my team, I allowed them to stay commissioned for as long as they felt comfortable. And then I told them I would be there to support them and help guide them throughout that year. So it was about a year that we really did kind of these small little things like, okay, I do all of this for you. I'm just going to take something tiny away. So it wasn't like everything was stripped out from underneath them. And from the feedback that I've gotten from the stylists that were working there previously are, oh my gosh, this was so seamless. This was so easy. And the feedback from people who had rented at prior places that came in as a renter were like, wow, you don't know how seamless you guys got that. That was really amazing. So I'm happy to say that it went really smoothly. And now we're at a place with our salon where we only have one chair left to rent, which is amazing. And we're getting into those systems, but it's an everyday constant thing. Okay, this isn't working. Let's try this. That's not working. Let's try that. So it's always, I think you have to know when you're going into a business, it's just going to be constant shift and change.
Definitely. And it was another opportunity to empower everybody. Again, that's one of your strengths. Absolutely. And I think we should say to the listeners too, we did not change physically. Like we didn't add any walls in the space. We kept it very open concept, and that's something you really wanted to maintain, right?
Yes. So there's a couple options when you're getting into being an independent stylist. So there's the suite route, like I went, which is your own individual room. The benefit to that at the time is I was like, you know what? I want to control the four walls I'm in. I just want to be in my own little bubble. And I wanted to experience that because I had worked in an open concept commission salon before that.
It's so funny to think of you in your own little box. I can't even imagine it.
I think back to that a lot, and it hurt. Like it makes me feel so claustrophobic. I'm not like, that space is beautiful. That space is so beautiful, and it was such a great opportunity for me. Like at the time, it felt like wow, but then when I was in there, it wasn't necessarily just the size itself. It was the fact that I thrive on being around people, and that's something that I only would have learned had I had gone into that suite and had that experience. So then when we were transitioning to rental, I was like, okay, I want an open concept space, and the stylist that I'm attracting is also someone who wants to be in a collaborative open concept space. It's not the person that wants to be in their suite. It just isn't. So I'm attracting a different type of stylist, but that is a great option for people who maybe they're trying to build out their future salon. They want to be in their own little space and kind of see how it goes, or they like that privacy. Maybe they're a little bit more introverted. Maybe they don't want to come into work and chat it up all day long. Like that's totally okay. So we have those two options, but for me, I feel this really beautiful balance of happiness when I'm around a team that's thriving and that's successful and that's doing cool things with hair, and they're pushing their business. We'll see like, ooh, she created that form. That's really cool. Oh, she has, this on her station. Oh, I like that. Like, it's kind of fun, and you just get inspired by the people you work with. So I really wanted to make sure I protected the culture that we had created from the very beginning. And that went into still, even as a rental salon, being very diligent in the way that I do my interviewing, because I want the right people in there. I don't just want someone paying a rent check. So,
and how do you do things now, like retail? Is it still the same way as you were doing commission, or did you change that up?
Yeah, so how I do retail, and this was actually a suggestion from one of my distributors, and at the time I thought she was a little crazy when I was listening to her. I was like, what are you talking about? But then I was so glad that she said something, because when I really went back to run the numbers, I was like, ooh, this is kind of important. So what some salons will do is they will charge a certain amount per month if you don't hit your retail, because we provide back bar for our stylists. So that means shampoos, conditioners, and products. We also provide all of the retail. So with a lot of systems, the more you sell, the more points you get, which then pays for your back bar, which is how you provide back bar as an amenity. It's very expensive. You'll see somebody put like 6 pumps and you'll want to croak over and like,
stop.
You're like, no, you're like, only use 3, because it is expensive. I mean, we use high quality products. And so, so the distributor, what she said to me, she said, Michelle, you might want to think about whether or not you're charging something if they're not hitting a certain number of retail, or the other option that I thought of, because I think that to me that felt kind of like back and forth, like a little messy. So basically what I did was you have to hit $500 a month, which is not that difficult. I know it's not a huge number, but $500 a month. And if you don't hit that, you just don't make your commission percentage, which is 15%, because if I pay that out, then I'm losing money if you're not selling that much. So I had to put that in place so that I made sure that I didn't fall into a deep hole of, just paying out of pocket for, I still pay out of pocket for some of it, but for all of it is a little expensive, and we just wouldn't be able to have that amenity. So it's really nice when everybody kind of pulls together. They make commission on it for one, so they make just a bird. We're good, everyone.
We're live, people.
We're live. You hear babies crying, you hear birds. We love it. So I needed to make sure that, one, they benefited from it, right? So they make commission. That's awesome. That's perfect. They also have retail affiliate links online, which is super easy. They can sell on their Instagram, which is awesome. So that also goes towards their salon retail. So if they hit that, beautiful. Once a month, I pay them out as a contractor a check, which is great. And then if they don't, then they just don't make that commission. But it's all written in my lease. Everything is very clear. So there's no hidden fees or dollar bills that are coming out or in. So I love that.
And when we set up too, I think we kind of spoke to this about some of the people coming in as renters were like, wow, that was really seamless for you guys. But you did set up the girls with, basically how to go into rental. Is there anything from that you would want to cover or share with anybody?
One thing I think as a salon owner that's really been helpful for me is I have like a rental checklist that I send to them as part of the onboarding process, which gives them a list of everything that they need to start renting. So it tells them what I provide, what they're going to need. So they can just go to the store and be like, okay, this is what I need. Great. I need their insurance. I need them to have an LLC. So it makes it easy to just have this checklist. So I think that was the best thing I did for them and the best thing I did for me, because it's very easy for me to stay organized with their onboarding when I have that checklist.
Definitely. And it can be kind of intimidating. I mean, people are like, an LLC, but you kind of walk them through it and kind of help them, and it's really not that scary at the end of the day.
Yeah, and each person is individual. I've had people that have rented before that maybe don't need as much support. I have people, this is the first time that they're renting, and so I'm always open. If someone wants to sit down and have a meeting with me, I'm more than willing to do that. I just did a pricing one with one of the stylists. I just did a new onboarding one, okay, here's kind of like she's like, if I'm missing anything, let me know. And I think what's really special is that they still look to me for that leadership, which is something I didn't necessarily want to give up. But we really look to each other for leadership too, because everybody has great ideas. And I've always operated that way, where someone else on the team might have a better suggestion than I do. And I love to hear it, because everybody has different life experiences which lead them to where we are, different salon experiences. And so it's really cool. In our group chat, we're always asking questions, hyping each other up. And so it's cool. I love that I can still lead, but they can also lead me. So that's kind of a fun position to be in.
Yeah, okay, let's get into some of our questions from our listeners. This is a limited edition episode, and we ask you to write in some questions. And so we got a lot of really good ones, obviously, on this topic. This one starts, when you first leave cosmetology school, should you do a commission first and get more experience? Or should you start your own business and rent a chair? This is also from Isabel, and she adds, by the way, you are such an inspiration in my life. I just had to tell you that too. It was so sweet.
Thanks, Isabel. I'm excited to answer this question for you. Obviously, everything depends on the person, okay? What's right for you and what's right for somebody else might be different. My personal advice is, even if you're not going to necessarily start as commission, I would definitely find a mentor, because I learned so much in the 6 months that I trained. And I think my program was faster because I had experience. I worked in that salon, all of that. And I had great trainers. So my assistant program is a year, and then they can go straight to rental after, or I'll keep them commissioned until they start building their books and they feel comfortable, and then we'll transition them. You learn so much. Why not find somebody that has all of the knowledge that you need, learn from them, take what they have to offer, and then you're gonna, I feel like you could just save so many years of going back and forth. I know the people that went to cosmetology school with me that went and had a chair right away, and then they backtracked because they were like, wait, I didn't learn, I didn't have the education, I don't know how to track my numbers, none of that. So find either programs or a mentor that you can be with for a year at least, and don't use them and abuse them or anything, but make it a mutual thing. Our girls get a chair at the salon when they're done assisting with me. So with that, I think either work at a commission salon, you're going to learn so much. There's so little that you learn in cosmetology school, and once you open your eyes to the big world, it's so cool to see what
that's always been surprising to me, but I think that's with any job. You get out of school, and the actual practice of it is so much different than maybe what you learn there. And yeah, I do think it's a good assisting is a really good method that we've had that's been really successful. And so you're not necessarily having all the pressures of, like we said, opening an LLC right away and stuff like that. These are daunting. These
are big topics to think about when you, especially if you're fresh out of high school, you're going to cosmetology school, you're 19 years old when you graduate, thinking about opening a a business can be a little bit intimidating and scary. But again, there's nothing wrong with you going and trying the rental route and being like, ooh, that wasn't for me, or trying the commissions route. I think you just have to focus on finding the right salon space. That's where a lot of people, they bounce around in their first couple years because the leadership there isn't what they're looking for. Like, do your research, interview at a million places, and just really find out. Like, I have some people come in and interview with me that are like, I'm like, oh, have you heard about a commission? Or they're like, what's commission? What's rental? Like, they don't know they don't go into that in school, obviously. They're teaching you the techniques and what it takes to pass your state boards. So just getting the knowledge. I never care if someone just comes and interviews with me and I'm like, you know what, I don't think this is going to be a right fit, but like, I'm happy to help you understand what your options are in the industry.
Yep. And you just want to make sure it's a good fit for you too, like you said, and keeping that flexibility, I think, is something that's important. Keep checking in with yourself. That's one of your big mottos.
All the time. Absolutely. Check in with yourself. Just always going back to, you have the opportunity to make changes. You don't have to stay in anything that you don't love. But I think before making fast decisions, just always go back, have a moment with yourself, see what's aligning with you and what's not.
Or if there's pieces of something that aren't aligning and pieces that are, you can kind of like see where you're at in that step.
Yeah, and sometimes people get so frustrated when they're in a work environment, but they're also not saying anything. It's so they're like, my friend Heidi always says this too. She's like, I don't know what I don't know.
Yes.
And that's so true. It's like, again, you're not the perfect ultimate human. Yes, you try to be as much as you possibly can and when you're a leader, but sometimes you do need your team members to give their feedback or to tell you when they're feeling a certain way so that you can do something about it, because there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to owning a business. There's a ton. Your brain is spinning in a million different directions. And so if you can have team members that are willing and you can have a heart that's humble enough to receive, it can be a really amazing collaboration, because if they bring something to you, they feel comfortable. It's such a beautiful blend. So if you are working at a salon that maybe there's just one thing that's kind of like irks your nerve, don't just get petty about it and be like, well, then I'm not going to clean then or whatever. Bring it up to your salon owner, and maybe they're a good person you can approach, or maybe they're not, but then that just furthers your decision in what you need to do next.
Definitely. I was going to say too, another big one when you're starting out and looking for salons and going through the interview process, you're kind of looking at that culture too. We've worked really hard on our culture, and I know that we always say like, oh, you know, someone who is not a go-getter, someone who can just stand there and not do things for a while probably won't be a good fit, because we kind of like to go around and pick stuff up, but it's really important that you're kind of being aware and looking for that culture too, right?
Absolutely. I was just having a conversation with my new assistant last night. We were kind of laughing about it. I was telling her things that I absolutely cannot stand, like things that I just know as a person, like I just don't work well. Like I don't work well with like slow people. Yeah. I'm just too fast moving. Not that there's anything wrong with being slow. Like, do you? Like, that's amazing. Yeah. But we're probably not going to be the best pair. Because I know myself, but I also then have to understand and learn and know them. Like, do they take feedback direct, or do they need me to like be a little bit softer with them? Because as a leader, I can shift a little bit to that. I'm never going to not be who I am as a leader, because that's why you chose to work with me. Yes. But at the same time, like, I am more than willing to try to understand the other person as well, not necessarily my way or the highway.
Yes. Okay, so best of luck, Isabel, on your starting out. That's so exciting. Okay, next question. This one comes from Tina. She says, as an owner, what are pros and cons for each model? We kind of talked about this, but maybe, sometimes the employees don't see the side of an owner. So maybe kind of discuss some of that.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that a lot of people, and I can say I'm guilty of this too, when you're a commission stylist, you think the salon owner is just banking in all of the money, and you sometimes can get a little bit envious or maybe a little bitter, because you think, oh my God, I'm making, let's say, 45 and they're making an extra 10% and, they're pocketing all this money, and it's not the truth, y'all. I thought that when I was a commission stylist too, and I won't, being a salon owner is certainly not going to be your most profitable business you probably ever opened in your entire life. Maybe it will be, but I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of expenses that go into it. And there's a lot of things that go into it too. So I think as a commission stylist, you have this benefit of coming to work every day and leaving it at work. You can go home, you can spend time with your family, you can go out on the weekends with your friends. So there's so many beautiful benefits about that. But with that means you're going to take home a little bit less, which is okay. You have more freedom, you have more time. That's what you're getting paid back in. Right. And the opposite end of it, you become a renter, you are going to probably make a little bit more if you're managing your finances correctly. But with that being said, you're now working. You can't just leave a week from getting back to your clients. If you're a renter, you have to get back to your clients. You are a business now. So you have to spend more time, which of course you're spending more time. You should make more money, right? I mean, I think that's...
You're responsible, yep.
Absolutely. So that is definitely a little bit of a pro and con there, or I should say... a misconception.
Yeah, and I guess as an owner too, we have talked about this, about how you did stay in that leadership role there, but is there a difference in that leadership from the commission to the rental now that they own their own business?
There is. The responsibility fall, let's say a color correction happens, okay? And the client calls and they're like, hey Michelle, I feel like I'm too blonde. I have to then direct them to the stylist, whereas before I would have handled that sticky situation. Or if someone's canceling last minute, everybody has their own cancellation policies and they're in charge of charging, no pun intended, but they're in charge of charging for that. So it's not my responsibility to communicate that to the client. My responsibility is to direct them in the right direction. So they do have to take on some of the dirtier work with that, whereas a commission salon, it would 100% fall on me to make sure that that's taken care of. And from a financial perspective, if a client comes back in for a correction as a commission salon owner, I'm now losing the time that stylist is working to take another client and the money because I'm providing the product, whereas when they're doing the correction, it's their product. So it's 100% on them, whereas it's at least 90% on me when you're a commission owner.
Yeah. Any other just general tips for salon ownership? I mean, this is another one we get, but I don't know. I think you just have a really good model of mentorship and collaborativeness, I'd say. And I know you kind of talked to it too, but about maintaining an open presence for people to come to you still.
I think maintaining an open door always, like having that be kind of one of the first things you say is like, okay, my door is always open. I'm open for feedback. Please come to me with it. It is super important. So I think...
And genuinely listening to that feedback too.
And genuinely listening. But on the other side, how I briefly mentioned before that you're getting feedback from your team, you can't let them run the salon.
Right.
So a lot of times people will involve their team too much. So everything, just like my therapist says, is a pendulum, swinging left and right. You can't go fully to the left, you can't go fully to the right. You have to constantly think about that balance where you're like, okay, I want to be in the center of this. I want them to have a voice and I want them to be heard. But at the end of the day, ultimately, I'm leading this space and the decision does come down to me. So if you ever find yourself going too far one way or the other, you just got to stop yourself for a second and you just have to think, okay, how did this happen? How did I get too far for the right on here? And now what system am I going to do to put back in play? And I think my team always knows that I'm not problem oriented, I'm solution oriented. So if there's a problem, I'm not going to hyper fixate on that. I'm going to figure out a way to make this right. And that builds a lot of trust within your team instead of if you had the leadership of, whoa, me, this is my problem, sad. They're going to start to catch that energy, whereas your team will catch the solution oriented energy as well. They'll come to me with, hey, I think this would be a good solution to this problem. We're right now refining our cleaning a little bit as we're a rental salon. And so I asked for their feedback, and I'm getting feedback where I think that would be a great idea, and in addition, I think this would help us succeed. It's always about us all succeeding together.
Yes, I love that. That's great advice. Okay, next question comes from Annie. She says, in 3 to 5 years, which one will be the most sought after salon type? What do you think? Ooh.
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm always like the best at predictions or anything.
Trendsetter.
I'm going to rub my crystal ball here for a second. I feel like in years past, commission was where it was at. I feel like currently rental is where it's at. I think in the next 3 to 5 years, I think we're going to see a little bit more of a balance because I think stylists are going to, I think salon owners are going to refine their models with commission, and so it's not going to be seen as this negative thing because it's not. It's a really pretty awesome deal.
Yeah.
And I think salon owners' eyes are pretty opened to not everybody's meant to open a salon. So I'm not sure if we'll see this surge of opening salons anymore.
Or maybe more a hybrid scenario like you're talking about. Or I think people are becoming really good advocates for themselves either way. So I think people are kind of taking the initiative to create the space that they want to live in too. And that's something that you've like taught forever. So
absolutely. I think people are smarter with where they're I don't know if they're smarter, but they're more intentional about what energy they're allowing in their space. And so they see that a little bit more, and so they're taking the time to find the right spaces. And I really hope that stylists find the right space and they stay with them for years, because it's one, not fun as a stylist to move all around, and two, like, you build that salon culture and that salon friendship. Like, I want my team to be there for years to come. And if they decide maybe they want to open a salon or something, I'm so happy for them. That's amazing. I'm going to be there to support you 1,000%. But you want them to be there for a while. So I hope we're seeing more consistency and more people are staying again, instead of kind of bouncing all around. But maybe these years will be the years where we try and see what's right for us, and then we all settle into something a little more clear.
Yes. I love that prediction. Okay, this is another great question from Cabra. How do you avoid the employee-renter divide?
How do you provide? Well, we don't have. Okay, so it depends where you start. So let's start there.
Yes.
If you go buy a salon, let's just say you buy it from somebody else, and half of them are employees and half of them are renters, you're dealing with like the past of whatever that salon owner did.
Sure.
So I always recommend, if you can, start with a fresh slate. I think it can be challenging to have both models in one space, because now you're still doing all of the things that it took to be a commission salon owner, but then having rental. So we don't necessarily, like, I wouldn't just bring in a commission stylist right now to work in our rental space, but my assistants, they work right alongside me, and their commission.
Got it. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
You know what? I think this question, though, I think employee-renter divide, I think they mean like the renters to the owner of the salon, right? Did I read it wrong?
Let's speak to both, I guess.
Let's do both, yeah.
So if you were in a hybrid space that had both commission and they had both rental, the renters feel like, oh, I can just go home and I don't have to worry about cleaning the space. It's not my responsibility.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
So they have that sort of vibes, not mine, but you can, because you think, I'm here, I'm renting the space, I'm not a commission stylist, this isn't my responsibility. So I think like right now, my assistant has the same duties as my renters do. You're in a rental space, you're making the space dirty just as much as everybody else is. Why should you not be contributing to the overall cleanliness and organization of the space? So I think that goes back to your culture, and I think that goes back to what your expectations are when you're hiring. That's where it's so important. They need to understand that when they're brought on, whether they're an assistant or commission or rental, that these are the expectations that I have for my space. And I think a lot of salon owners aren't clear in that, and that's where the confusion and the division happens. So I think it goes back to the salon owner having a clear vision for their space, clear expectations, and making it more so even. And I think doing team building, parties or whatever, just treating everybody like an equal, because you shouldn't be looked down on like you're less than because you're a commission stylist, or you shouldn't be put on this pedestal because you're a renter. Right. So I think when you visually see, like if you think of them differently, that's where the divide happens. But you're all in one cohesive space. These are your foundations, and these are what you need to set in place.
Yes. I was just thinking, too, going off of that, is there ever a divide between, like, a salon owner and then the renters?
There can be, absolutely. I've heard many from a lot of different stylists. They'll definitely talk to me where it's kind of like the renters will gang up together, kind of against the salon owner. But really, instead of doing that, think about, maybe you guys are just in the wrong space. Maybe think about what you're doing. Like if the salon owner has to constantly go back to themselves and kind of put themselves in check, well, so do you, So I think there can be, if you start to feel that, listen to your gut and don't let it go too far, because it's right. And once somebody builds resentment against you, they're going to constantly continue to build more, because they need to build a case in their head that you're the wrong one. Yes. They're always, and vice versa. Same thing if you're the salon owner and you're starting to build a case with one of your team members. If you allow them to continue to do something wrong over and over and over and over and over again, you're going to get resentful, you're going to get annoyed with them, but instead you need to have direct conversations with these people and quickly. Because what happens when you wait super long, if all of a sudden there was a situation, Katie wasn't doing her thing, she was missing all these deadlines, whatever, and I didn't say something to you right away, and I let you do that for 6 months, and then all of a sudden 6 months later, I'm like, you know what, Katie, over the last 6 months, how is that going to make you feel? Terrible.
Right, the expectations weren't there, yeah.
That I was thinking that about you for the last 6 months. That hurts. Right. So if I can have a conversation with you right away and be like, hey, okay, cool, this clearly isn't working. Let's think of a different schedule or something like that we can work out, that this is going to work better. Let's have a conversation, fix this right away, because then you're also letting them get in a worse habit. Yeah. So you have to constantly, when you're in a leadership position, you have to constantly be ready. It sucks sometimes because you're like, do I want to tell you that you need to wipe down the shampoo bowl after your client? Not really. I don't have fun doing that. It's not cool. But when your friend comes to me and they're mad about it, I'm like, okay, Michelle, it's now your time. Yes. So you just have to constantly be willing to address challenges, because that can also then frustrate the rest of your team. If somebody else is getting away with something but then they're not, so that goes back to the fairness, where you kind of got to treat everybody like an equal.
Yes, definitely. Okay, one of our last questions here from Tiffany. She says, how do you have a cohesive environment while each stylist has their own business? I find it must be tricky, but I love that you figured out a formula that seems to work.
Ooh, okay, that's kind of fun. So cohesive environment while each stylist is
their
independent.
Own business. Yep.
I think you have to hire the right stylist for your space. So it goes back to the interview process and really expressing the culture and expressing the type of clientele that you guys are bringing in. Because when I was in my suite, and nothing wrong with this, it was very different ranges of work ethic, of types of clients. It wasn't cohesive in that, and I think that's when it feels cluttered. I've also taught all of them, so they have a lot of the practices that I put into play when I had my commission salon. And I coach them when it comes to whatever they need help with. So if they're not doing great at social media, I sit down and I talk to them and I help make them feel confident in that area. And we also do have standards amongst the salon. We all have to come in dressed, looking the part. That's part of my culture code. It's a small sheet that I have that I just read to them, and I say, here are the standards and care and behaviors that as a rental salon even we all abide by. We provide luxury services. We communicate with our clients. We come ready, dressed up for work. We're kind to each other, and I let them know you can be let go if you are being, as a renter, if you have bad vibes, you're being mean girl, you're talking smack, you're gossiping, you're coming into work looking a wreck, because when I'm standing in that same space as you, you're a reflection of me. And same thing, I lead by example. Am I ever coming into work looking a hot mess? No. Am I always early? Absolutely. And if I'm not, I got in an accident or something, because that happened one time. But anyway, it's like, you have to practice what you're preaching to. That is so important, because a lot of times, you want your staff to do something, but you're not willing to do it either. Am I cleaning the bathrooms? Yes. Am I stocking the snack bar? Yes. I'm doing everything that I'm expecting of them. And so I think that's how you create a cohesive business, and from a look standpoint on social media, because that's probably what this...
I was just going to say, right out the gate, if you're searching us, I think you can see kind of the vibe we give off. So then even before the interview, they're seeing that.
Yes, so you're hiring the right stylist for your space. That doesn't mean that they only do one type of hair or they only dress a certain way. It just means they have the same overall goal for their level of service and the way that they present themselves. And from a social media standpoint, we manage the social media from the salon. So I'm not having the team post for us or anything like that. We want a cohesive language. But at the same time, I think if you go to each person's page, you can see where their individuality kind of comes through. And I encourage that even through our website. I want them to have their bio feel like them, sound like them. If they're short and sweet and to the point, be short, sweet, and to the point. If they're long and lengthy and drawn out, be that way. So it's their individuality, but also making it visually look cohesive. what I focus on doing from, a marketing standpoint. Even today, we filmed the salon tour video, and I said, okay, guys, we're neutral colors. I don't care if you wear neon green or hot pink in my salon. I do you, boo. Like, I mean, these girls dress up. They look good. Yeah. But at the same time, when I'm filming something that's, like, cohesive for the salon, I just, like, it's those little things. Or they're taking a picture of after picture of their client. They can totally take a picture of their client in hot pink. I'm happy for that, but I just probably won't use that one for the salon page because it just doesn't go with our overall feed. I want you to look at the feed and get a feel for what it's going to look like inside of the space and feel like inside of the space, which comes down to the color palettes that you're using. It comes down to the smiles on the client's faces. So there's a lot of different factors that really... You don't want it to feel like a catfish. You want it to feel like this is what I expect this is what I see on Instagram, and when I come into the space, that's how I'm going to feel.
That's what it is. One of the other things we do in the interview process, even still as renters, is shadow days. Do you want to talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. So if you guys go to our website, we can link it below. You guys will see the 5 steps to my interview process. And one of them is a shadow experience. And so what that really does is that's 6 to 8 hours that you're spending with me and the team. So you can get a really good feel for if that person feels comfortable in the space, not only for us, but for them. Mm-hmm. Because again, we want them to be in there for a long time, and we want to make sure it's the right fit. So they come in and they shadow me. The worst thing they do is they learn from me all day long for free, which is awesome. And then from there, I purposely tell the team, like, hey, we have a shadower coming in today. Talk to them, get to know them. And they feel a little bit of a part of that as well, because not that I would necessarily be like, I'm going to take exactly what they say and that's going to be my opinion. I'll form my own opinion. But a lot of times they come up, they're like, you know what, I had a really good conversation with them. That was super fun. Like, I really enjoyed them. And I'm like, thank you. I appreciate that, because I want someone that's going to fit with everybody. And the stylists feel very protected by that.
Well, that kind of wraps up our questions. Thank you to everybody again who submitted. These are just such great episodes, and we will be doing a little more deep dive on this season in these limited edition episodes about topics that we often get asked about. Anything else on rental versus commission you want to wrap up with, Michelle?
Dear Lord, I'm tired just doing this interview today.
You've done it all.
No. Yeah. Honestly, I would just say if anybody has any questions specifically that they're listening to this episode and they're like, you said this, but I have a question about that, please just send me an Instagram message. Shoot me a message. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. I try my absolute hardest. I'll probably send you a voice memo because that's just my thing. But don't feel like you have to send me one. But it's just at beautyby_Michelle Senour. It's always in the link of the description of the podcast. So please just ask me a question. I mean, I love it. And then maybe it's something I'll use on a future episode.
Awesome. Okay, thanks again. We're wrapping up, signing off this live.
All right. Thank you guys so much for your questions. You guys can always submit a question of your own by clicking the Ask Me Anything link in the description of this podcast. And as always, you guys, if you could share, put the green bell on, just share this with your friends. I'd be so grateful because you don't know how much it helps me. And I appreciate you guys so much. XOXO.